WBOB.
Hey, it's Ed Dean, Roger Henderson. Let's get to it. Mark Mix on our newsmaker line is the president of the National Right to Work Committee. They've got almost 3 million members of their public policy organization. So, Mark, you guys, I think this is a good issue, by the way, when you talk about big labor, even though big labor really isn't here in the state of Florida. But if Val Demmings were able to defeat Marco Rubio, she would make Florida try to look like one of those blue states up north.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed. Thanks for the opportunity to be on and talk a little bit about this, because obviously time's getting short. But yeah, Val Demmings has actually voted for a bill in Congress that would repeal Florida's right to work law and force Floridians to pay union dues or fees in order to get or keep a job. Marco Rubio has been a defender of right to work, not only at the state level, but at the national level as well. And so when we think about the differences that come up in these elections, and obviously there's lots of them, but one of them that's important to Florida, because Florida has been a right to work state since, I think, 1947, and you've given workers the ability to join unions, participate in unions, and be active in unions if they want to, but you have not contemplated the notion that they can be forced to pay dues or fees to a private organization in order to work. It served Florida well. It served the 26 other states that have right to work laws well, and Val Demmings has voted and co-sponsored a bill that would take that away from the state of Florida.
Mark, as you travel throughout the country, you see a lot of these states that they believe that the GOP is going to take away their, quote, workers' rights, which just isn't really the place out there. When you look at a lot what's happening, there are numbers that show, for example, since 2018, 2019, and forget about the AFL-CIO, you can include them as well, their numbers have dropped. The school union numbers have dropped. Now, we're talking combined over a couple of 100,000, but yet they still, on the surface, still have a lot of power in these states votingly or politically.
Yeah, that's right. Their political power is out of all proportion to their numbers, Ed. And one of the things that's happened since 2018, our sister organization, the National Right to Work Legal Defense Foundation, won a U.S. Supreme Court case called Janus v. AFSCME, where the Supreme Court ruled that everything that government unions do, red teachers unions, is political. And so workers in states that work for government at the local level, at the city level, at the county level, whatever level they work at, can't be compelled to pay dues or fees to a union in order to work for their government. So we basically have a national right to work law for all government employees. And I think when workers are given the choice and they take a look at what the teachers union stands for in the classroom, and Lord knows we've gotten an amazing picture of that over the last two and a half years about what's going on in the government school system. And a lot of teachers have walked away saying, we don't want to support that. We don't support that. And, union officials kind of wonder, they scratch their head and say, why do people leave us? Well, the reason why they leave them is because they're talking about things in the classroom as opposed to reading, writing, and arithmetic, talking about radical social agendas that is kind of blowing up across the country. It started right here in Virginia where we're at, in Loudoun County, last year in the elections when, a Democrat candidate for governor was about to mail it in thinking he was going to win. And then he said, you know what? Parents probably don't need to be involved in decisions about education for their children. Well, the moms got mad, and look what happened. And I think a little bit of that's going to happen tomorrow.
Mark Mix is the president of the National Right to Work Committee. Mark, over the last several years, conservatives in many of these states, aligned with your organization, has been able to fight back and to not have much influence. You want to have more of a right to work state out there. You mentioned the unions and the teachers' unions. You saw what happened, as you mentioned, in Loudoun County, what's been going on in Virginia. Do you perceive that if the elections go the way that many of us want them to go, and if some of the state gubernatorial offices remain red, are we going to see more of a remake of how the unions will look like in several of these states after tomorrow?
Well, I think so, and I hope so, and Ed, but the most important job we have to have on Wednesday is to hold those people that get elected accountable. I mean, we can't let them come to Washington or Tallahassee or Sacramento, California and say, oh, yeah, well, look, we said all this on the campaign trail, but we just can't, we don't have the energy to fight for it. So no matter who's in control after tomorrow night or however long you're going to have to stay up to report the results, we just got to hold them accountable, and that's our job. And whether it be Republican or Democrat, it doesn't matter. The idea that an individual can be forced to pay dues or fees to a private organization in order to work in America is wrong. Everyone knows it's wrong. Over 80% of all Americans know it's wrong, but yet public policy continues in that direction because one party is completely dedicated to the notion of forced unionism because they benefit politically from it, and the other party's scared. They don't need to be scared, Ed. They need to push for individual freedom. It works. The American people are listening, and they're going to vote for that, I think, tomorrow.
All right, so there we go. Let me, I I got a couple minutes. A couple of things I want to bring up is we have some of the other groups that out of D.C. They come on the radio show, and we got a continuing resolution bill. In other words, what they're saying is if the Dems lose tomorrow, look out what may happen in a lame duck Congress for the next 2 months. Do you believe that they will try to push more unionization items, that they may try to get something done if they lose tomorrow night between then until the new election or to the new Congress is sworn in January?
I do think they will, Ed. I really do. I think that obviously they're going to spend more money and they're going to do a resolution and all this other stuff to keep the government going, and that'll be the leverage point that Schumer and Pelosi will be using against the Congress as we get to January 3rd and the swearing in. The bottom line is this. I mean, they're going to try. I think they'll try. Senator Schumer has indicated he will try to push a bill that will repeal right-to-work laws across the country, a bill so-called PRO Act, the PRO Act, which basically repeals Florida's right-to-work law. They may try to push that and get a vote on it. And who knows? They have talked about changing the rules of the Senate, making it a majoritarian body, taking away the right for extended debate. They could do that. We just have to stay vigilant. We can't give up. We've got to hold everybody accountable from the moment that the election results are in till the moment the new Congress is sworn in, and then our job gets even tougher to hold that new Congress accountable.
Yeah, I think these are still hot button issues, even though that it's just still amazing. I mean, we talk about, I know you do as well, some of the unions have kind of seen their membership drop, but man, they still got a lot of enthusiasm and still got at least a lot of power that's going on, and it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Like you say, they all talk a good game. Then when they get elected, we don't hear from anything else for another couple of years.
Yeah, that's right, Ed. And that's our job. In this grand experiment of self-government, it's our job to hold the people accountable and to be educated about what they're doing. I mean, the governmental system that was created such a long time ago and has worked well, but it's got a little rust on it and some barnacles needs to be cleaned off, and we need to continue to work toward exercising our rights.
Real quick, you said something, a little rust and barnacles. That goes back to the days of Depression era. Like, was it Davis-Bacon, all those acts and things like that are federal laws out there that was going to protect unions, where those laws have rust and barnacles on them. We needed to revamp them or eliminate them. I know that Republicans wanted to do it back in the early 90s when they won, but you would think it's time is, like, for example, okay, that might have been good back then, but in today's society, do you really need to have all of these unions around?
Yeah, well, Ed, specifically on the Davis-Bacon bill, that bill passed in the 1930s was specifically designed to discriminate against blacks. It was basically saying we don't want black construction workers, working in the North. I mean, it was really literally a discriminatory policy. It continues today. Democrats don't frame it that way, but what it is now, to your point, it basically eliminates about 85% of all construction workers from participating on jobs that have some government money in it. Basically, you have to have a union contract or be a union contractor in order to participate in all of this stuff that Biden's been spending over the last 2 years when he talks about these, quote, good union jobs. Well, he's discriminating against 85% of the construction workers who don't have a union card in their pocket and basically pay those taxes that are allegedly paying for, well, taxes, I don't know where they're coming from, but anyway, from the future. But he's discriminating against people that have decided for whatever reason not to be in a union. It's outrageous and it's wrong.
By the way, Mark, Roger and I talk about this a lot. Can you imagine if, for example, in Florida, if Al Demmings ever, the Democrats want to get their way, can you imagine like the unions took advantage of all the COVID money? We're not going to open up till we get more pay and more slush funds out there, which we've documented. Extortion, yeah. And can you imagine if, like, for example, the food stores like Publix and Walmart were unionized? Can you imagine what they could have done to make the supply chain even worse starting back in 2020 if they wanted to hold up things?
Yeah, well, Roger, I heard the wise voice of Roger in there. Well, we may have that in another 2 weeks as the railroad shut down because of a strike. We have a port contract that's going out on the West Coast. 29 ports out there negotiating a union contract, and the two busiest ports in the country are out there, and they may just shut that down. The railroads may shut down, and somebody told me that we don't have diesel fuel enough to supply the trucks that supply our grocery stores. So it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of work that has to be done for sure.
Incredible. Mark Mix is the president of the National Right to Work Committee. Mark, I'm sure we're going to have you back on. There's going to be a lot to talk about, see where things go. So thanks for coming on this morning.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
Ed, appreciate it.